Why are we opposed to having a homeless shelter?
Hey, hi everyone. How's everyone doing today? I recently been getting a lot of questions on why do we not want a homeless shelter. So I'm going to address this question and concern today because I think there's a misconception of what we're fighting for and there's a misconception of what we're representing. So I'm going to answer this. So there's nothing wrong with homelessness. There's nothing wrong with having a homeless shelter. We're not opposed to having a homeless shelter. Some people in need, in desperate times and hard times, do need a shelter and places to stay, etc., etc. That's not what we're saying in our fight and in our protests. So we're okay with having shelters. That's not the problem. The problem is having one at the certain location that they want to put it in. The second problem is how the shelter is coming out to be. So the community was lied to in the bait and switch. So what does that mean? Since 2021, 2022, the community voted on having rezoning of the region area to have affordable housing with a mixed commercial unit. So what does that mean? That means that we agreed to build a mixed commercial business with housing, residential housing, of affordable housing. That was what the community voted on Community Board 15. That was what our councilwoman voted on, Narcisse voted on. And in all the Department of Buildings and meetings prior to that, that was what was voted on. Now, come 2023, our community councilwoman, Narcisse, and our Community Board 15, Teresa, receives a letter stating that now they're approving to have a shelter there from the Department of Homeless Services being run by West Hub. That is the problem. It's a bait and switch. Now West Hub's not taking responsibility. They're saying, well, we don't know about the previous plans for affordable housing. That was not part of our developers. We don't know nothing about that. We were approved for a homeless shelter. That's what we're going to put there. And now the community coming out in 2025 March, when we had a community board meeting about this and found out about this, and we're all coming out and saying, no, this is a bait and switch. We didn't agree to this. How do you just decide you want to have this when the whole community says no? So this is why we're protesting. This is why we're against having a homeless shelter at 2134 Coyle Street, because the community did not agree to any of this. The community didn't even know about any of this. They're trying to go above us, to silence us and go above us and just making the deal among themselves, from the Department of Homeless Services, a government agency, to West Hub, to the previous developers, Slate Group, and then all these other LLCs, Coyle Properties LLC, all these other names that they have it under for whatever, and trying to make it confusing for everybody, like who owns what, who's the developer, who's not the developer. It's like a bait and switch. This is what we're fighting for. And plus, West Hub and the LLCs are suing the homeowners that own the homes behind the development place that they want to build this homeless shelter. They're suing them for not letting them use their property at the back to build scaffolding. So that is really absurd in all points of the word absurd. You can sue somebody for their own private property for not letting you use their private property to build whatever you're trying to build, which we're not allowing you to build because we don't agree for you to build. Nobody in the community agreed to it. Nobody in the community agreed to it. Nobody in the community knew. So now, skipping forward to April 2025, and now we're heading on to May 2025, and we're still having this problem. So we've been encamping out there at 2134 Coyle Street to not allow the developers to start building against our will. So people 24/7 in our community are camping out there trying to protect their assets, trying to protect their rights, trying to have a democracy. That you cannot just do what you want just because you think it's necessary and to have it there when everyone else is saying no. There's a vote, there's a democracy, there's a due process. Why is there a due process? If no one's going to follow the due process, what is the purpose of the due process? That is what we're protesting for. We're protesting for injustice. We're protesting for that we don't want something that we didn't agree on, and you just decided that you want, bam, put it there. So this is the real problem. This is the issue. And is the media outlets reporting this as the issue. Some of them are and some of them are not. They're putting out two sides of the story, but the real side of the story is that they lied to us, and yet they still think they can still do it, because the Department of Homeless Services put out a new statement to one of the people who wrote to them, and they said, well, we're still going to go forward with our plans because, hey, this is needed in our community, because it's needed in the society that we need more housing for the homeless. Well, homeless shelters should not be placed near daycare centers, schools, where there are kids, where there are other things that are resources that are not part of what they need for themselves for these homeless shelters. Even though they keep on emphasizing that it's transitional housing for families, for mothers and children. Okay, who's going to believe this? Maybe it is transitional housing, but nobody agreed to this. And everyone knows any place that has a homeless shelter, if they don't have the proper resources there, it's going to increase in crime. It's going to be bad for the kids. It's going to be bad for the community overall in general, because people are going to do things that are risque. And this is what people are trying to avoid. They don't want this in residential areas. That doesn't mean you can't build it in places that are not residential areas, places that already have shelters that should be able to build on, and other things like that. We just don't want to build it here because nobody in this community agreed to it. But maybe that's the problem. Nobody in any of the other communities agreed to it either. Let's say, for example, Borough Park. They didn't agree to that shelter either. Park Slope. They didn't agree to the shelter either, but they built it secretly, and now they have shelters there in Park Slope. We know this because the community members from there are coming down to Coyle Street and telling us what happened to them, that they got duped and they built it without them knowing. They thought they were building luxury condos or co-ops. It could turn out to be a homeless shelter. So this is something we're trying to avoid, guys. So please come out. So guys, please come out and march with us on May 4th, this coming Sunday at 1:30, meeting in front of 2134 Coyle Street. If you haven't seen it already, we have flyers and posted almost everywhere saying about this community awareness march. We're going to march from 2134 Coyle Street all the way down to Avenue U, past Coney Island Avenue, and then back to 2134 Coyle Street. The purpose of this march is to let more people become aware, people like you who are asking, why are you against homeless shelter? This is the real cause. This is the reason we are marching, so more people are aware of what's going on in your community. So if you're not active in your community, please do more research. There are already some media outlets that have reported on this issue, but I feel some of them are a little bit biased, that they are pro-shelter, but others are more objective and giving two sides of the story. But what is more important is for you to do the research and for you to find out what is the real reason and why we're against it, because it is a bait and switch. We feel gypped and duped, and there are other communities just like ours who got gypped. Communities like Borough Park, communities at Park Slope, and other communities that are 86th Street. They all want to build these shelters everywhere. But the point is, we don't want these shelters built near schools, near daycare centers, near kids, near things that we feel is unsafe, because as we know, having a shelter at these locations would be detrimental to a lot of things, because a lot of people know certain things happen that are shady in shelters, and we are trying to avoid that. No matter how the Department of Homeless Services and West Hub are trying to spin it, that it's going to be better service than any other shelter they ever had, I highly doubt it. And let them prove us wrong. Maybe it is, but don't build it here. Built in locations where there are also active services for these people who are in need of these shelters. Places that have government assistance, other services, outreach services. Those are the places where these shelters should be built at, for real. So, guys, please, if you're gonna ask this question, do your own research, watch some of my other videos. It is very detailed. There's a total of, I think, 8 to 10 videos going on the topic about different things, about what's happening in our community. There are also community board meetings happening every month, once a month, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. So if you want to attend those meetings, please do. Because this doesn't just affect the immediate community, which is District 46. It affects our neighboring District 48, our District 47, District 43, 44. So everyone's affected in one way or another. So please come to our Community Awareness March, May 4th, 1:30 p.m. and learn more and be more active and proactive about what's going on in your community. That's it.
Outrage growing in Brooklyn over a planned homeless shelter in Sheepshead Bay. Dozens of residents staging a 24-hour sit-in, setting up these tents along the sidewalk outside the site at 2134 Coyle Street. The goal, to block construction crews from entering and starting work. Demonstrators say they're concerned about safety, with the site located near several schools and daycares.
We will not be safe for the kids. There are a lot of schools around in this neighborhood.
The city's Department of Homeless Services says the community was notified about the shelter plan in July of 2023. They noted that the shelter will house 169 families with children, and that any insinuation that vulnerable families would be a danger to the community is entirely baseless. A spokesperson saying in a statement, "We need every community to do its part to support our neighbors in need. This new shelter for families with children, which will be the first long-term shelter of any kind in this council district, will provide vulnerable families with a safe and dignified place to stay as they transition back to permanent housing." Protesters are calling for affordable housing, which they say was the original plan for the site. Westhab, the private developer behind the project, said they had no involvement in any previous plans for the site. The company says it's important for families at the shelter to have access to schools, grocery stores, and the basic services that every New Yorker depends on. Despite a recent court injunction that prevents protesters from blocking access to the property, residents vow to maintain their encampment along the sidewalk to ensure their voices are heard.
This is our family, our area, and our community, so we have to protect us.
The shelter's opening date remains contingent on securing necessary construction permits and approvals from the city and state.
This is just a handful of comments regarding this issue. I hope today this video addresses all these questions. We have a lot of these type of comments asking me, why are we opposing to a homeless shelter? Isn't it a good thing to have one? I hope now you understand the reason why we do objecting. We're so lucky to have such a dedicated team of community members, volunteers, business owners who are donating and helping the cause, fighting the resistance against this injustice. 我哋好開心有一班好落力支持我哋嘅鄰舍、街坊、生意人員、探美員，同埋好落力嘅每一位。無論你覺得你做嘅一切係小事或者大事，但每一個人嘅貢獻係需要嘅，係必須要嘅。所以呢度同大家講聲多謝，多謝你哋嘅貢獻，多謝你嘅支持。特別係夜晚看更，多謝你哋嘅付出。早上嘅公公婆婆，多謝你哋一直以嚟呢2個月幫我哋睇住2134Coyle街。我哋要返流民所，有你們真好。我哋一齊堅持努力，一定會勝利。